Hello and welcome back to the channel. In today's video I'm going to be sharing with you how to cut a simple overbust corset. So if this is something you like, please don't forget to hit on the subscribe button. So first, here is my pattern paper and I will start with marking my shoulder to bust, shoulder to under bust, shoulder to waistline, and for my top length I added 5 inches after my waistline. The total length of my dress is 22 inches because my shoulder to bust is 9, my shoulder to under bust is 12, my shoulder to waistline is 17. Adding 5 inches, I have 22 inches. So I'll go ahead to mark my shoulder divided by 2, come down by 1 inch, and from that point, I'll be drawing my shoulder slope for my pattern. The next step is to mark my chest line or armhole line, which is your bust circumference divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches. Mine is 7 inches after, and I'll be making a dot and I'll mark a line at that point. So at the shoulder, I'll just go ahead to mark this and I'll place my ruler to draw out a straight line, and after that I'll divide my armhole into 2 and I'll go ahead to mark. After that, I will be going in by ½ inch. Then at the chest line, I will go ahead to mark my bust circumference divided by 4. I will connect from the chest line to the ½ inch we have at the armhole and to the upper part of my shoulder. So this is my armhole curve. The next step is to mark your dart, and to mark your dart, you're going to start with marking your nipple to nipple point. So my nipple to nipple is 7 inches divided by 2. I have 3.5 inches, and I'll just go ahead to mark this all the way to the lower part of my pattern because I'm using a straight dart, and I will draw out. After drawing out, the next step I'm going to take is to mark my dart intake of 1 inch at both sides, and I'll also mark that at the waist and then at the top length of the dress. Now place my ruler and I'm going to draw a straight line at those marks that I have made on those points. So after I'm done doing that, I will connect from the bust line to the under bust line, and I will also repeat this at the other side of my pattern this way. Now I will use my marker to outline the rest of my pattern to make it more visible for you to see. After I'm done outlining it, we'll head over to marking the upper part of my pattern. So from the upper part of my pattern, from the chest line, I will measure 2 inches, and at that 2 inches mark, I'll be ruling out a straight line. I'll extend my nipple to nipple line at that point, and I'll go ahead to draw a straight line. And I'll go ahead to mark my dart. So instead of taking 1 inch dart, to avoid much gaping at that point, I'll be using 0.75, and I'll place my curved rule and I will connect this back, and I'll also connect at the other side, and I will just connect and mark out. Next is to insert my body measurement. So at the bust, I'm going to mark my bust circumference divided by 4, and I will go ahead to measure the dart intake I have there and add my sewing allowance of ½ inch. So for this pattern, you don't need too much allowance. Half or 1 inch is okay. At the under bust, I'll mark my under bust circumference divided by 4, and I'll measure this dart intake and I'll go ahead to replace it, and I'll add my sewing allowance. Heading down to the waistline of my pattern, I'm going to mark my waist circumference divided by 4. Measure the dart intake, replace, and add ½ inch for my sewing allowance. At the lower part, I'll mark my hip circumference divided by 4, measure the dart intake, replace it, and add my sewing allowance. Now I'll use my curved ruler to connect my pattern all the way, starting from the upper part all the way to the lower part of the pattern. So after I'm done doing this, I'll just go ahead to use my marker to mark this out to make it more visible for you to see. So now to snatch my waistline, I'm going to divide what I have here into 2 and mark. Now I'll place my ruler and I'm going to draw out a straight line at that point. So now I'll be marking ½ inch dart intake on both sides. Why? Because I want to take out 4 inches from my waistline. My actual waistline is 28 inches, so I want to take out 4 inches, making it 24. So that 4 inches, since we are dividing our pattern by 4, I'll be dividing it by 4. So I have 1 inch, and that 1 inch I'll share half inch on both sides. So with that way, if you repeat this at both sides of your front pattern and at the both sides of your back pattern, you'll be taking out 4 inches. So I went up by 2.5 inches by the waistline, and I'll just go ahead to connect this all the way to the end or the other side of my pattern, because we have like a slight basque at that point. So this is what I have, and we'll be heading over to the upper part of the pattern. Here I'll go up by 1.5 inches from my chest line, and I'll go ahead to blend in this way and reconnect. And I'll be taking it all the way up, getting to the side. From that point, I have 2 inches after my chest line. I went up by 1.5 inches again, and now I'll blend it into my pattern at the back, and I'll come up at this point a little. So you can just leave it at your chest line, or you can just come up with half inch. And now I'll just go ahead to use my marker to outline this and blend in the lower part. So I'll be numbering this so that I don't misplace each pattern for the other side. After this, I'll just go ahead to cut out my pattern. So at this point, if you find this tutorial very interesting and educative, please don't forget to hit on the subscribe button. Give this video a thumbs up. So after cutting, this is what I have. Now heading over to the back pattern, I've gone ahead to mark out all my basic measurements, just like we did for the front. And to start, I'll go ahead to mark my dart, which means I'll be marking my nipple to nipple divided by 2. And I'll be drawing a straight line at those points that I have marked for my nipple to nipple line. So after I'm done drawing this, I'll be marking half inch at both sides to extend it to the upper part. So this is a basic dart for this dress. And also, if you notice, I didn't use a bust dart, a bust side dart for this. So I'm making this pattern illustration beginner friendly. So after that, I'll insert my bust measurement and add half inch for sewing allowance. Mark my under bust circumference divided by 4. Measure the dart intake, replace and add half inch for my sewing allowance. Mark my waist circumference divided by 4. Measure the dart intake and add my sewing allowance. Here I'll be marking my hip circumference divided by 4, and I'll add my sewing allowance. So after I'm done doing that, I'll just go ahead to place my curve drew, and I'm going to be connecting this all the way, starting from the under bust down to the waistline and to the top length. And I'll just go ahead and use my marker to outline the rest of my pattern. After marking it also, we are going to go ahead to snatch the waistline of this pattern. And to snatch the waistline, I'm going to be drawing a style line at this point, or you can just measure what you have there and divide. So I'll just go ahead and mark the same half inch on both sides, and I'll be extending this all the way up, and I'll take it down just like we did for the front part of the dress. And after that, I'll just go ahead and use my marker to mark this out. After I'm done marking out, I'll just go ahead to come down by half inch from the chest line to avoid the lacing bar area to pop up when you're wearing or putting on a dress, and I'll connect this to the chest line. After I'm done doing that, I will be marking the lacing bar area of this pattern. And to mark the lacing bar area, you can use any measurements of your choice. It totally depends on how open you want your back pattern to be. So for me, I'm using 2 inches, and I'll just go ahead and place my ruler and draw out a straight line. After that, I'll just make a dot to indicate that that is the lacing bar area of this pattern. And I'll use my marker to outline that part. Coming down to the lower part, I'll mark 2.5 inches here, and I'll go ahead to mark 2 inches here. Then I'll just go ahead to connect. And after that, I'll use my marker to outline this. So after I'm done marking this out, I'm done with the back pattern, and the next step is just to go ahead to cut this out. So at this point, if you find this tutorial very interesting and educative, and you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, please hit on the subscribe button. give this video a thumbs up. You can also follow us on our other channel, which is Maki's Closet. There I do both drafting and sewing tutorials. And before I went ahead to cut out the full pattern, I had to number it 1, 2 and 3, and I'm just going to go ahead to cut this out. It's important to label your pattern so that you don't join the wrong part to another part. So after I was done cutting out my pattern, this is what I have, and with this we have come to the end of today's tutorial. Thanks.